So, Megyn, I saw in an interview that you said you left your son's your son's school because the boys were asked weekly if they're still sure they were boys.
Yep. Can I tell you about this story?
Yeah, please.
So I've talked a lot about my son's school that I left, and I loved this school. It's an amazing school, and we were really sad that it took the turn that it took. Oh, it's gone dark just for drama.
Yeah.
But what we found out from our son, first of all, when he was in third grade, we found out that they unleashed a 3-week experimental transgender education program on these boys with really inappropriate videos. The kids were confused. These are 8 and 9-year-olds, Glenn. They don't know. They have no idea what the school is even talking about with the trans thing. And they got really in depth with really in-your-face videos. And then parents complained. And the school did something it hasn't done in its 400-year history, which was they apologized. Even they realized they had done wrong. Then I said to my son a year later, so how did they ever round back to the trans thing? Like whatever happened with, and he's like, every week. I'm like, what? He said, they bring it up every week. I said, how? He said, well, they managed to work into a lot of the conversations that, in some places there are 100, they believe there are 100 genders. How many people here still feel confident that they're a boy? Do you still feel sure you're a boy? I said, how often do they ask you that? He said, about once a week. I'm like, Doug, so I said to my husband, we're out of here. This is not support. This is not non-bullying. This is indoctrination, and it's deeply confusing to the children and wrong.
So, I've heard this story before, and I haven't heard you answer. Are they still sure they are boys? I mean,
they're 100% boys.
So what are you doing? Because isn't New York, I mean, that's all New York seems to be now. I mean, because if it's happening in Texas and happening in Oklahoma, I mean, it's got to be at every school in New York City.
It's styled under the auspices of non-bullying, right? And so that's why they parade girls who were never expressing any gender confusion up on stage because they're going through a tough time and suddenly they say they're trans, that they're trans boys. They parade them up on stage at these all-girls schools and they get snaps. Right? Like you're going to celebrate this, even though in 80% of the cases, it's a passing phase. It's the result of something the girl's going through. It used to be anorexia, it used to be cutting. And now some of these girls are choosing to say they have gender confusion because it's trendy. And the difference between those two things is you don't cut off your breasts when you're anorexic. Right. Now you have other physical problems, but there are reasons parents are putting their kids in the hospitals to solve that, not to feed it. Right? We don't celebrate a girl who is clearly thin who goes on stage and says, I think I'm fat. Nobody's giving snaps for that. And so the whole ideology has turned support, non-bullying, kindness, friendship, allyship on its head.
Well, you have there's a new study out now, transgender mortality rate much higher than the regular population. So people who have had transgendered surgery, they're even worse off than the people who have just gender dysphoria.
Glenn, we have trans people in our family, and one who's rather close to our family. And this person had the full transition, the surgery and everything, and really wound up saying it didn't solve my problems. It created more of them. Right. It created more. All the things, you know how it is. We all have unhappinesses in our life. We all have things that we lament or that depress us. I think for a lot of trans people or people who think they're trans, they view the surgery, their transition, the living life as the opposite sex, as the answer to those things. Right. That we all suffer from, but it's not the answer to all those problems. And in fact, it can create a lot of new problems that are now irreversible if you have the surgery.
So here's the really scary thing. This is happening now because of social media. It's happening with girls who never were having this problem. And it's happening with mainly girls that are doing all kinds of things to the body. The doctors aren't allowed to say, well, now, wait a minute, let's slow down. Let's talk about it. How about some counseling? And so they're going through this surgery, and it's caused by social media. Many people believe, at least for the numbers that are happening. This is criminal, absolutely criminal.
The absolute surrender of the medical community to this insanity is a scourge on this nation. It's disgusting what's happening with our doctors. There are people who are legitimately transgender, who have gender dysphoria. And for those people, we should be supportive and they should get the care that they need. But what we've done instead is taken everyone who expresses any sort of gender confusion and said, you're trans, you're trans. And we have our psychiatrists doing this. Whereas instead of probing, what's happening in your family? Are you going through a divorce? Are you suffering from bullying? Have you been in the target? A lot of these girls, they're overweight. They have acne. They're not popular. Maybe they're on the spectrum. That's sadly been the case in some of these instances where instead of going with an actual diagnosis of being someplace on the autism spectrum, they get a diagnosis of, oh, you're trans. And parents instead are saying, oh, we'll take that. Oh, okay, that's like a trendy thing that the kid can get snaps for, as opposed to being mildly autistic. It's crazy. And the thing is, Glenn, the medical community, not only do they say, yes, affirm, but once you prescribe puberty blockers and then testosterone to a young girl who's suddenly saying she's a boy, she's infertile. She cannot have children. The fact that we're doing this so willy-nilly in the name of allyship or support it's abusive. It's
all
criminal.
bullcrap. I'm so sick of the allyship and all of this bullcrap. We're over in the Middle East, and we have saved homosexuals. We have saved women. We have saved children. And every step of the way, where's the National Organization of Women? Where's the Me Too movement? Where's the LGBTQI movement? Where are they? They're nowhere to be found. It's a lie. These civil rights organizations that claim to be leading civil rights, they're bogus. It's a sham. All of it is a sham.
You and I both know they might be there to help you if you're a liberal Democrat.
Yes.
Maybe. Not even necessarily. Look at Tara Reid, lifelong liberal Democrat, accused Joe Biden, went to Time's Up, was basically told to pound sand because that organization with Anita Dunn running their communications was tied up with Joe Biden. So they lied to her and said, oh, we never take a case that involves a politician. Well, it wasn't true. And now that organization has completely it's fallen apart. I mean, the entire board has resigned now. The head of that company or that organization was helping Andrew Cuomo instead of the accusers. They're corrupt. They're there to cozy up to power, not to fight it. And they certainly have no interest in helping somebody who has an R after their name. That's why Caitlyn Jenner, who, by the way, is coming on my show today with Larry Elder, that ought to be fun. That's why she's hated by them. You would think Caitlyn Jenner, she's the most famous trans person in the world. They can't stand her, not because she hasn't spoken out on trans issues, but because she's a conservative Republican.
Right. So, Megyn, how is this? Are we making progress? I mean, I feel like the world is absolutely on fire. The world I described where everyone said I was nuts, it's not going to happen, is the world we're living in now. It's the beginning of that world. And I do have some hope because I've seen average people stand up and say, I'm not playing this game anymore. I'll just do it myself. And I think there is a greater desire universally for the truth and just not, I'm sorry, I'm not going to play the game. I'm not going to be an ally with things that are not true.
Yeah.
Are we getting better, worse? Where are we in this cycle, do you think?
I don't think we're doing better on the trans front, I have to say. I think we're still stuck in the midst of a crisis in understanding how to deal with that. I think on the racialization of the nation, I feel like people are fighting back now. That's been so prevalent in our schools with the CRT and the diminishing of black people because of their skin color and the shaming of white people because of theirs. I think parents are fighting back on that. Regular civilians, if you will, not people like pundits like you and me. But I don't know about the trans thing.
But aren't all of these things kind of connected? Like, Anthony Fauci has zero credibility, and that thing is going to come undone in a big way. So we're not listening to authority figures. We're not listening to these so-called science gods. We're looking for common sense coupled with science and coupled with facts, but we're not listening and giving the credibility. You can go ahead and try to smear people like you used to. And try to smear you and destroy you, try to smear me and destroy me. I don't think it works. I don't think any of this stuff, I think it's all coming undone. Mm-hmm. Do you agree or not?
You should say that I don't know. I would like to say yes, because I've generally believed that you don't fight when somebody calls you a racist all the time. It's like, I don't get out there and say, oh, no, 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 because who are you going to persuade? The people who want to believe that about you are determined to believe it. And your fans, the people who know you, they don't believe it to begin with. They don't need to hear you take on, these crazies who use those terms indiscriminately. So I've just long believed there's no moving people on things like that. I do think that these terms, bigotry, whether it has to do with gender, sexuality, race, what have you, they've been completely diluted to the point now where they have far less meaning. And that's a shame, right? They used to actually mean something where they could change people's hearts and minds. They don't anymore. But I do think the regular civilians, like my neighbors, let's say, people who I live next to when I'm at the Jersey Shore in the summer, they are still afraid of these very loud woke warriors. And it's a small group. I think they think that they're bigger than they are. I think it's 10% of the population, if that. And I do think people like us who have these microphones, if we don't start being louder and louder and encouraging people to push back against this nonsense in their schools, at their corporations, in their sports, in their media, in their Hollywood choices, then we're going to lose. Then that 10% is going to grow and grow and grow and become even more powerful.
Megyn Kelly, always good to talk to you. I'd love to spend some time. I hope you are following what's going on with the State Department in Afghanistan. It is a crime and needs to be exposed. Thank you so much. Megyn, you can hear her on her podcast, or now you can hear her on Channel 111. It's the Triumph channel. If you're listening to us on XM Sirius now, just keep it where it is. She'll be on right after this program. Megyn, thank you so much. Always good to talk to you.
Thanks, Glenn. Lots of love.
You bet.